It began on a day that felt ordinary in every way. The city moved at its usual pace, full of noise, tired faces, and people lost in their own thoughts. He was one of them, walking quickly, shoulders slightly bent, mind crowded with worries he carried every day. Life had never been easy for him, but he had learned not to complain. He believed that if he kept moving, kept working, and stayed quiet, things would somehow work out. He worked at a small office that handled paperwork for different businesses. It was not a dream job, but it paid the bills. Every morning, he arrived early, not because he loved the work, but because being late was never an option. Responsibility had shaped him from a young age. There were people at home who depended on him, and that thought followed him everywhere that same morning. She was also on her way to work, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. Her life looked calm from the outside, but inside, she felt stuck between what she wanted and what life allowed her to have. She had dreams that felt too big for her current world, dreams she kept hidden so they would not get laughed at or questioned. She worked in a nearby building, helping with basic office tasks. Her role often went unnoticed, but she did her job with care. She believed small things mattered, even if no one praised her for them. People described her as quiet, but in truth, she simply listened more than she spoke. Their first meeting was not dramatic. There was no music, no long stare, no instant spark that movies talk about. It happened near a crowded entrance where people rushed in and out without looking up. Someone bumped into her from behind, and the tea spilled down her hand. She gasped in surprise, more from shock than pain. He saw it happen and stopped without thinking. He handed her a clean handkerchief from his pocket, something he always carried. Their eyes met briefly. She thanked him softly, embarrassed more than anything else. He nodded and said it was nothing, and walked away before the moment could grow awkward. They both moved on with their day, thinking little of the encounter. Yet something stayed with them. For him, it was the calm way she spoke, even when startled. For her, it was how he helped without trying to impress or linger. Over the next few days, they noticed each other more. Passing in the hallway, waiting for the elevator, or standing in line for lunch, their paths crossed again and again. Each time, they shared a small smile or a polite nod. Words were few, but comfort slowly grew. One afternoon, the elevator stopped suddenly between floors. People sighed and checked their phones. Someone joked nervously. She stood quietly near the corner, clearly uneasy. He noticed and spoke to her, asking if she was okay. She nodded, admitting she did not like closed spaces. He stayed nearby, talking about simple things, the weather, the building, anything to distract her. When the elevator finally moved again, she looked relieved. She thanked him, this time with a smile that reached her eyes. He smiled back, feeling lighter than he had in days. From that moment, conversation came more easily. They talked about work, daily struggles, and small joys. Nothing deep at first, just pieces of life shared between short breaks and passing moments. Still, those moments became something they both quietly looked forward to. He admired her patience and kindness. She admired his honesty and steady nature. Neither spoke about feelings. They both had reasons to be careful. Life had taught them not to rush, not to expect too much. At home, he often sat in silence after long days, thinking about Bill's responsibilities, plans that never seemed to move forward. Yet now, his thoughts sometimes drifted to her calm voice and thoughtful questions. It surprised him how comforting that felt. She, too, found herself replaying their conversations while lying awake at night. She wondered why such simple talks made her feel understood. She had met many people before, but this felt different. There was no pressure, no pretending. Still, doubt hovered in the background. They came from different worlds, shaped by different experiences. She worried about reading too much into kindness. He worried about getting attached when life already demanded so much from him. One evening, rain poured heavily as people rushed to leave work. She stood under the building entrance, waiting for the rain to slow. He appeared beside her, holding an old umbrella. Without much thought, he offered to walk her to the bus stop. She hesitated for a second, then agreed. They walked slowly, sharing the small space under the umbrella. The rain drowned out the noise of the city, creating a quiet bubble around them. They talked about childhood memories, favorite foods, and moments that had shaped them. For the first time, their words carried weight. At the bus stop, she thanked him again. The bus arrived, and she stepped inside, waving through the window. He stood there watching as the bus disappeared into traffic, feeling a strange mix of happiness and uncertainty. That night, both of them knew something had changed. It was still unnamed, still fragile, but real. Neither could guess how deeply this connection would grow or how much it would test them. For now, it was simply a beginning, quiet and unplanned. Like most unforgettable things in life, days turned into weeks, and the small, simple encounters that had brought them together began to form the foundation of a quiet friendship. They started noticing the little details about each other, the way he always straightened his papers before starting work, the careful way she arranged her pens and notebooks. These small habits, unnoticed by most, became familiar landmarks in their growing connection. Their conversations, once brief and polite, began to stretch longer and delve a little deeper. During lunch breaks, they shared more than just polite comments. He asked about her weekend, her hobbies, and the things that made her laugh. She listened, intrigued by his straightforward answers. And sometimes she shared stories about her childhood, the dreams she kept tucked away, and the moments that shaped her quietly resilient spirit. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves waiting together under the same small shelter outside their office building. The rain had started suddenly, and most people had scattered. He handed her a small plastic bag to protect her bag from the rain, and she laughed softly, grateful for the unexpected gesture. That moment, simple as it was, added another layer to the connection between them. Over time, they discovered a rhythm in their interactions. Sometimes it was a shared cup of coffee in the break room. Other times, it was a brief walk around the block to stretch their legs during a stressful day. With each passing day, the comfort between them grew. There was no rush, no overt declarations, just a quiet understanding that they enjoyed each other's company more than they expected. As their friendship grew, so did their awareness of the differences in their lives. He carried responsibilities that often weighed him down: bills, family obligations, and the constant pressure to keep everything in order. She, on the other hand, had her own challenges, balancing her dreams with the reality of a modest paycheck and limited opportunities. These differences sometimes surfaced in their conversations. She would express frustration about her career, and he would offer advice, sometimes softly, sometimes bluntly. But there was always respect, the mutual recognition of the hardships they each faced. One afternoon, sat together in the break room, sharing a quiet moment over tea. She talked about a small victory she had experienced, and he listened intently, his eyes showing genuine pride. It was these moments of quiet support that deepened their bond. They realized they could share victories and setbacks without fear of judgment. The trust between them grew, small yet sturdy, like the first roots of a tree. Yet not everything was smooth. There were moments of doubt, subtle and quiet, like shadows that flicker in the corner of a room. He wondered if he could ever allow himself to care for someone when life demanded so much. She questioned whether it was wise to get attached to someone whose world was so different from hers. They never voiced these doubts aloud, but the tension was sometimes there, silent yet palpable. Then came the first true test of their growing bond. A stressful project at work forced them to collaborate closely. Hours were spent together, late into the evening, organizing, planning, and problem-solving. During this time, they discovered each other's strengths and weaknesses. He admired her patience under pressure, her ability to stay calm and focused even when things seemed to fall apart. She admired his determination and the quiet steadiness he brought to the chaos. It was during these long hours that their connection began to feel less like coincidence and more like an inevitable part of life. One evening, as they packed up their belongings after a particularly long day, the office was quiet, the usual hustle and bustle gone. He noticed her shivering slightly and offered her his jacket. She hesitated, then accepted it, feeling the warmth not just from the fabric, but from the thoughtfulness behind it. That evening, they walked out together, the streets glistening with rain. and shared a few more words than usual, their conversation easy, flowing, and comfortable. It was in these small acts of care that their feelings began to quietly, yet unmistakably grow. Outside of work, life continued with its usual unpredictability. They began to share glimpses of their personal lives, a favorite cafe she visited on weekends, a quiet park where he sometimes went to think, small stories of family and childhood that revealed who they were beyond the office walls. These exchanges made their connection feel real, tangible, and safe. There were also moments of lighthearted fun. They would tease each other gently about minor habits, laugh over small misunderstandings, and find joy in simple things like a shared snack or a funny story from the news. These moments of laughter were precious, a reminder that even in the midst of life's challenges, there was space for joy and companionship, despite their growing closeness. Unspoken feelings lingered beneath the surface. They each caught themselves thinking about the other at odd times, wondering if the other person felt the same way. Neither wanted to rush, and yet, the awareness of something more than friendship began to color their interactions with a gentle tension, a quiet anticipation. One day, a small accident at work or spilled drink. A minor mishap gave them an opportunity to step in and care for each other in a way that was unplanned, yet natural. He helped her clean up without hesitation, and she, in turn, made sure he had everything he needed to continue his work. The simple act of looking out for each other deepened the understanding between them, reinforcing the sense that they could rely on one another, even in the midst of this growing closeness. Life reminded them that it was not always simple. Responsibilities, doubts, and personal insecurities sometimes intruded, creating moments of hesitation and uncertainty. But each time, they found their way back to the small, meaningful interactions that had brought them together in the first place. It was a slow, steady process, a dance of closeness and caution, of care and restraint. As the weeks passed, their bond became something neither could ignore. They began to notice the absence of the other more than they realized, missed the small conversations, the shared glances, the moments of quiet understanding. It was a feeling neither had expected, yet it was growing steadily, quietly, like a plant reaching toward sunlight in this part of their journey. It was not grand gestures or dramatic events that defined their connection. It was the small things, the shared smiles, the thoughtful actions, the conversations that lingered in the mind long after they ended. It was the way they began to understand and care for each other in ways that went beyond words. They had reached a stage where they could share their worries, their joys, their small victories and setbacks, and feel understood without fear of judgment. It was a friendship that was slowly transforming into something more, a bond that promised comfort, trust, and the quiet thrill of unspoken possibilities. And while neither could yet predict what the future held, both felt the subtle, yet undeniable shift in their lives. They were no longer just two people passing by each other in the corridors of a busy building. They had become companions in the quiet moments, witnesses to each other's small triumphs and setbacks, and the first hints of something extraordinary were beginning to take root, ready to grow into the unforgettable story that was just beginning to unfold. As the bond between them grew stronger, life's challenges began to cast shadows over their connection. The world outside the walls of their office continued as usual, but within it, small pressures started to test the patience and understanding they had built. It was subtle at first, missed messages, delayed replies, small miscommunications, but it slowly grew into moments that required them to face the reality of their differences. One morning, he arrived at work with the weight of a sleepless night. A family issue had kept him awake, and the stress was evident in his slouched posture and quiet demeanor. She noticed immediately the familiar concern stirring in her chest. She asked softly if everything was all right. He shrugged, giving a vague answer, trying to keep the burden to himself. She respected his space, but the worry lingered. That day, a misunderstanding occurred during a shared project. Instructions were misread, and a simple task became tangled, causing frustration on both sides. Normally, they would have laughed off such small errors, but the tension of outside responsibilities and personal fatigue made patience thin. Words were exchanged that carried more bite than intended, leaving both feeling unsettled and uncertain. It was a moment neither wanted, Yet it revealed how deeply they had begun to rely on each other emotionally as they sat in the break room later. The silence was heavier than usual. She stared at her cup of tea, gathering her thoughts. He leaned against the counter, his jaw tight, struggling to reconcile his stress with his feelings. Eventually, one of them spoke, hesitantly, acknowledging the mistake and the tension. It was awkward, but necessary. Slowly, they began to untangle the knot of misunderstanding, realizing that their connection required both care and communication to survive the strains life inevitably brought. Outside of work, his responsibilities continued to pull him in multiple directions. A relative needed urgent help, demanding his time and attention. He struggled to balance this with the growing attachment he felt for her. Meanwhile, she faced her own challenges. An opportunity for a small promotion required extra hours, leaving her exhausted and less available than usual. Their attempts to connect were interrupted repeatedly, creating a sense of longing mixed with frustration. Despite the challenges, there were moments of reflection that deepened their understanding of each other. Late one evening, after a long day, they found themselves talking quietly in the office lobby, the city lights casting a soft glow around them. He spoke honestly about the pressure he felt from family, the fear of letting people down, and the uncertainty of balancing personal life with responsibilities. She listened, empathetic, offering gentle words that did not judge or lecture. It was in these moments that trust grew stronger, even as distance and difficulties made the connection feel fragile. Misunderstandings continued to appear in different forms. A casual comment made by her friend was misinterpreted by him, leading to quiet irritation. She noticed his withdrawal and felt the sting of miscommunication. They both realized that assumptions could create unnecessary walls, and the challenge was learning to navigate them without letting small issues grow into significant problems. It was a delicate dance of patience, understanding, and constant learning. One weekend, a sudden rainstorm caught her while she was out running errands. She called him on a whim, unsure why, and he immediately offered to come pick her up. The effort he made, despite the pressures and exhaustion of his own life, touched her deeply. They spent the ride talking about lighter topics, avoiding heavier concerns, and for a while, the storm outside seemed less important than the quiet connection they shared inside the car. Small gestures like this reminded them why they cared for each other, even when circumstances were difficult. But life has a way of testing bonds just when comfort seems near. A financial challenge emerged, unexpected and urgent, demanding his attention and pulling him into long hours. She faced her own setbacks, as a project she had hoped would advance her career fell through. The timing of their struggles, though unrelated, created a shared stress that made communication harder. They began to notice gaps where messages went unanswered and moments where plans were missed, not out of lack of care, but because life demanded it. During this period, emotions became more complex. He felt guilt for not being as present as he wished. She felt frustration at the unpredictability of life that kept them from spending more time together. Yet, underneath the frustration was a growing recognition of the depth of their feelings. It was no longer just friendship. There was attachment, concern, and an unspoken hope that they could overcome the challenges together. A turning point came one evening when a minor accident occurred, a spill in the office kitchen. She rushed to help him, and he did the same for her. In the midst of laughter and light scolding, they found relief from the tension that had built over the past weeks. That moment, simple yet human, reminded them that despite the difficulties, they could rely on each other. It was not a dramatic reconciliation, but a small, meaningful one that reinforced the bond they had formed. As time passed, they learned to communicate more openly. They spoke about frustrations directly, shared their fears and pressures, began to navigate life's demands with a sense of partnership. Their connection was no longer just comfort, it was tested resilience. They discovered that love, or the beginnings of it, required patience, understanding, and a willingness to face life's challenges together. One evening, as they walked out of the office together, the city lights reflecting on wet streets from a recent rain, he admitted quietly that the past few weeks had been overwhelming. and he was grateful for her presence, even when he struggled to show it. She smiled, her heart lifting, knowing that the feeling was mutual. It was a moment of vulnerability that neither had experienced before, a small step toward deeper emotional intimacy. Even as their bond grew, reality continued to press in. Responsibilities, personal pressures, and the unpredictability of life reminded them that love and friendship were never simple. There were still moments of doubt and tension, but the awareness of each other's support provided comfort and strength. By the end of this part of their journey, both realized that connection alone was not enough. It required effort, understanding, and forgiveness. They had faced the first significant test of their growing attachment, learned from it, and discovered that their bond could endure the small storms of life. It was a lesson in resilience, patience, and the quiet power of care, setting the stage for the deeper challenges and rewards that lay ahead in their unfolding story. Time passed, and life, as it often does, demanded changes that neither of them had anticipated. The challenges that had tested their bond now led to a separation, not dramatic but quiet and unavoidable. Circumstances pulled them in different directions. He had to focus on family responsibilities that could not be ignored, and she was presented with an opportunity that required her full attention and commitment. It was not a choice between love and life, but rather a recognition that timing sometimes shapes the paths we must follow. The separation was difficult. For both, it was not marked by anger or conflict, but by a quiet sadness that lingered like a shadow over ordinary days. They missed the small interactions that had once brought joy, shared coffees, brief conversations, and simple gestures of care. The absence of each other highlighted how deeply their connection had grown. Even when it was not fully acknowledged, during this time apart, they each embarked on a journey of personal growth. He found himself dealing with responsibilities that felt heavier without the comfort of shared support. He discovered new ways to manage stress, developed patience, and learned to appreciate moments of quiet reflection. These lessons, though difficult, shaped him in ways he had never anticipated, teaching him resilience and self-reliance. She, too, experienced growth in unexpected ways. The opportunity she had pursued required dedication and courage. There were moments of doubt, fear, and exhaustion. But through these challenges, she discovered inner strength she had never fully recognized. She learned to trust herself, make decisions with confidence, and navigate setbacks without losing hope. The absence of their shared connection made her realize that love could inspire growth even when it was not physically present. Despite the distance, memories of their time together lingered. Small details replayed in their minds: the way he listened, or the way she laughed at minor jokes. The comforting presence that had once seemed ordinary but now felt extraordinary in its absence. These recollections were bittersweet, a reminder of what they had shared and a motivation to carry those lessons forward. Occasionally, their paths would almost cross by chance: a familiar glance across a street, a shared elevator ride, or an unexpected encounter near their workplaces. These moments, fleeting as they were, stirred emotions that neither had fully processed. Each interaction reminded them of the bond they had and the potential for what could be if circumstances allowed it. During this period, they also reflected on the nature of their connection. They realized that true attachment was not only about presence, but also about understanding and trust. Even in absence, they carried concern for each other's well-being and celebrated each other's small victories from afar. The quiet support that persisted despite separation demonstrated the depth of their feelings in a way that words alone could not capture. Time also allowed them to reevaluate their priorities and expectations. They considered what they truly wanted from life and from each other. Through introspection, they understood that love was not only about being together, but about fostering growth, learning patience, and appreciating the individuality of the other person. This understanding transformed their perspective, turning longing into acceptance and hope. Amid these reflections, small gestures and signs continued to connect them. A thoughtful message, a shared memory, or an unexpected note of encouragement became bridges across the distance. These acts, though simple, reinforced the emotional bond that remained strong despite the physical separation. It was proof that love could endure, Even when life's circumstances forced a pause, they also discovered the value of independence within connection. The time apart allowed them to build confidence in themselves and their capabilities. He learned to handle challenges with calm determination, while she developed resilience and adaptability. These lessons strengthened their individual identities, which in turn would allow them to approach their connection more fully and consciously in the future. Occasionally, the separation brought moments of doubt and questioning. They wondered if the bond they had was temporary, if the distance would weaken the connection, or if life's unpredictability would prevent them from finding their way back to each other. These doubts were natural, yet they also became a catalyst for deeper understanding. They realized that love, real love, was not just about constant presence, but about enduring respect, care, and emotional connection. Through this time of growth and reflection, both began to notice subtle signs guiding them back toward each other. A shared friend would mention something familiar, or they would hear news that reminded them of the other person. These moments, though small, felt significant. It was as if fate, quietly and patiently, was nudging them toward reunion when the time was right. As months passed, they found themselves better prepared for the possibility of reconnecting. The challenges they had faced separately had strengthened their resilience, empathy, and understanding. They no longer felt incomplete without each other, but rather enhanced by the lessons learned during separation. This balance of independence and connection laid the groundwork for a more mature, conscious relationship in the future. During the rare moments of communication, they shared updates about life, career, and small victories. These conversations, though limited, carried a depth that had not existed before. There was an unspoken acknowledgement that their bond was enduring, shaped not just by affection, but by the shared journey of personal growth and resilience. In this part of their story, the separation was not a defeat but a necessary chapter. It highlighted the strength of their connection, revealed their vulnerabilities, and allowed them to grow individually. Each had learned that love could survive distance, that it could inspire growth, and that patience often yields the most meaningful rewards. By the end of this period, both felt a quiet readiness. Life had challenged them, taught them, and prepared them for the moment when their paths would converge again. The bond that had once been tested by misunderstandings, responsibilities, and absence had not only survived, but had deepened. It was now stronger, wiser, and more capable of enduring the unpredictable course of life, though they had been apart. They carried each other in thought, in memory, and in quiet support. They had learned that love is not always immediate or dramatic. Sometimes it is patient, reflective, and enduring. And in this understanding, they found hope, anticipation, and a readiness to embrace the next chapter of their unforgettable story together. After months apart, life finally aligned to give them a chance to reconnect. Neither had planned it, and yet fate seemed to conspire in quiet ways to bring them back together. It was not dramatic or cinematic at first glance. It was a simple meeting at a community event near their neighborhood, the kind of place where people went about ordinary errands, unaware of how significant the encounter would become. He arrived first, slightly early, as was his habit. He stood by the entrance, watching the familiar surroundings and thinking about the months that had passed. Life had been demanding, but it had also taught him patience, resilience, and the value of genuine connection. He found himself hoping, quietly and cautiously, that she might be there. She appeared a few minutes later, carrying herself with the quiet confidence she had developed during their time apart. The moment their eyes met, the months of separation melted away. There was no awkwardness, only recognition, and a gentle warmth that immediately reminded them of the bond they had shared. Both felt a mixture of relief, excitement, and the gentle flutter of emotions that neither had expected to feel so intensely after so much time. They greeted each other with a simple smile and a soft exchange of words. The conversation started cautiously, tentative steps as they navigated the emotional landscape of reconnection. Then, as they began to talk about life, work, and small daily experiences, the comfort returned. There was laughter, shared memories, and an ease that spoke of familiarity, trust, and the bond that had endured despite the distance. During the conversation, they discovered that the challenges they had faced separately had made them stronger, more understanding and more capable of valuing the connection they shared. He admired the determination she showed in pursuing her goals, the way she had faced obstacles without losing hope. She, in turn, respected the quiet strength and responsibility he had demonstrated, managing life's demands with a balance that was admirable and inspiring as they walked together through the nearby park. Sharing stories and small observations, it became clear that the connection between them had grown deeper, richer, and more mature. The absence had given them perspective, and the reunion allowed them to appreciate each other in ways they had not fully realized before. Every word, every gesture carried meaning, a testament to the bond that had endured the tests of time and circumstance. Over the following weeks, they spent more time together, slowly rebuilding the rhythm of companionship. Each meeting, whether brief or extended, became an opportunity to reconnect and strengthen the emotional foundation they had cultivated. They spoke openly about the past, acknowledging the difficulties, the misunderstandings, and the lessons learned. There was no blame, only an honest reflection on the journey they had shared. One evening, they found themselves sitting on a bench under the soft glow of streetlights. The city around them hummed with life, but they were wrapped in a quiet bubble, focused entirely on each other. He spoke of how the time apart had made him realize the importance of presence, cherishing small moments, and of valuing connections that go beyond superficial interactions. She shared similar thoughts, describing how her experiences had deepened her appreciation for understanding, patience, and genuine care. In these moments, they recognized that their love was not the kind depicted in stories filled with instant attraction or grand gestures. It was quieter, yet stronger. Love built on understanding, endurance, and shared experiences. They had learned that true connection could survive challenges, separation, and the unpredictability of life. As their bond solidified, they began to envision a future together. Not a perfect, effortless life, but a partnership grounded in trust, respect, and the shared desire to support one another. They discussed hopes, dreams, and practical considerations. Knowing that life would always present obstacles, but confident that together, they could navigate them. Small gestures became significant symbols of their commitment. A shared meal, a helping hand, a thoughtful message, these ordinary acts now carried extraordinary meaning. Each interaction reinforced the understanding that love was demonstrated not only through words but through consistent care and attention. They also shared moments of quiet joy, simple pleasures that reminded them of why they had been drawn to each other in the first place. Walking through familiar streets, enjoying a cup of tea together, or laughing at a shared memory, all of these became precious reminders of the enduring bond they had built. With time, they realized that their journey together was unique not because it was free of difficulties, but because it had been shaped by them. Every challenge, every separation, every moment of growth had contributed to the depth and resilience of their connection. The love that emerged was thoughtful, grounded, and deeply human. One afternoon, as they sat overlooking the city from a quiet rooftop, they shared a conversation that felt like the culmination of everything they had experienced. They spoke of gratitude for each other, for the journey, and for the lessons that life had provided. In that moment, there was a profound sense of peace, a recognition that the love they had found was rare and worth nurturing with care and attention. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they held hands without needing to speak. Words were not necessary. The connection between them was understood, felt, and embraced. The journey that had begun with simple encounters, tested by challenges and separation, had led them to this moment of quiet, enduring love in the final chapters of their story. They understood that love was not always dramatic, not always immediate, but it could be unforgettable. It was a love that had endured trials, encouraged growth, and inspired them to become better versions of themselves. The story of their connection would leave anyone who witnessed it amazed not for grand gestures, but for the depth, patience, and resilience it represented. Their love was now a steady flame, resilient against the winds of life, capable of bringing warmth, comfort, and inspiration. They had learned that the most remarkable connections are often built quietly, with attention, care, and an understanding that endures even through absence. And in this, they found a love that would remain unforgettable. A testament to the power of genuine human connection, patience, and shared growth. Life, as it often does, continued to test them. Even after they had reunited and found comfort in each other's presence. But this time, their experiences and the bond they had built gave them the strength to face challenges together. Part 6 begins with the quiet understanding that love is not only about joy but also about perseverance, compromise, and shared growth. They had settled into a rhythm that was different from before, more intentional and conscious. Every small interaction carried meaning, and they learned to appreciate the ordinary moments as much as the extraordinary ones. A morning walk, a shared cup of tea, or a simple conversation after work became acts of connection that reinforced their commitment to one another. They understood that love was nurtured in the everyday details, in the attention given without expectation, and in the support provided even when words were unnecessary. One morning, he received news of a challenge at work that required his immediate attention and long hours. Normally, such a situation might have created distance between them, but she approached it differently. Instead of feeling neglected, she encouraged him, offering practical help and emotional support. She listened patiently as he spoke about the pressures he faced and reminded him that he was capable and resilient. Her understanding and empathy created a sense of partnership that neither had fully experienced before. Similarly, she faced her own set of difficulties. A family issue arose that demanded her time and emotional energy. He responded with patience and care, stepping in where he could to help ease the burden. He recognized that support was not always about solving problems, but about being present, listening, and offering comfort. These acts, though simple, reinforced the foundation of trust and intimacy between them. As they navigated these challenges, they also continued to grow individually. He learned to balance responsibility with self-care, understanding that supporting others effectively required personal strength. She discovered her own resilience, realizing that she could manage difficulties without losing herself in the process. Together, they celebrated these small victories, recognizing that personal growth was intertwined with the growth of their relationship. Their connection deepened through shared experiences and quiet reflections. They spent evenings talking about dreams they had nurtured alone, exploring how they could support each other in achieving them. The conversations were honest, unhurried, and reflective, creating a space where vulnerability was safe and trust was absolute. They began to understand that love was not only about closeness, but also about encouraging each other's individuality and aspirations. During one particularly difficult week, when responsibilities seemed overwhelming, they found solace in simple gestures. A note left on the kitchen table, a cup of coffee made just the way one preferred, a gentle touch on the shoulder. These small actions reminded them that attention and care often carried more weight than grand declarations. They realized that love thrives in thoughtfulness, consistency, and shared effort. They also discovered the importance of communication in sustaining their connection. Misunderstandings still occurred occasionally, but they had learned to address them promptly, without letting resentment fester. They approached conflicts with calm, open-hearted dialogue, seeking understanding rather than victory. This maturity transformed their interactions, reducing tension and creating a sense of security that had not existed in the early stages of their relationship. One afternoon, they revisited the park where they had spent so many quiet moments together in the past. Sitting on the same bench, watching children play, and couples pass by, they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. They laughed at small memories, shared observations about life, and acknowledged the growth that had taken place in both of them. The past, with its challenges and separations, was no longer a source of regret, but a foundation for gratitude and strength. As months passed, they began to make plans for the future, not in a rushed or pressured way, but thoughtfully and intentionally. They discussed aspirations, shared goals, and ways to support each other in realizing their dreams. The focus was not only on their bond as a couple, but also on the individuals they were becoming together. They understood that a fulfilling relationship required balance, mutual respect, and the willingness to grow both independently and as a team, in addition to practical matters. They also nurtured the emotional and spiritual dimensions of their connection. They celebrated small joys, expressed appreciation regularly, and made time for meaningful conversations. These practices created a sense of fulfillment that extended beyond romantic affection, enriching their lives with shared understanding and companionship. They discovered that love was not a fleeting emotion, but a daily practice of care, attention, and empathy. Challenges continued to arise, as life is rarely predictable. There were moments of stress, fatigue, and frustration. But the foundation they had built allowed them to navigate these difficulties together. They developed strategies to manage tension, including honest communication, shared problem-solving, and moments of reflection. Through these experiences, they realized that the endurance of love was measured not by the absence of challenges, but by the ability to face them together. They also learned to cherish the unpredictability of life. Spontaneous walks, unplanned conversations, and moments of laughter became highlights of their routine. They understood that while plans were important, the beauty of connection often emerged in the unscripted moments. These experiences reminded them that love is enriched by presence, attentiveness, and the willingness to embrace life's unpredictability with a partner who shares the journey. Over time, they noticed the subtle changes in each other, the calm confidence in her voice, the quiet patience in his gestures, the shared understanding that required no words. These small observations became sources of joy and reassurance, affirming the depth of their connection. They recognized that the true essence of love was found in these everyday details, in the attentiveness and care that built trust, comfort, and intimacy as they reflected on their journey. They realized that the love they shared was extraordinary not because it was perfect, but because it had endured and evolved. They had faced challenges, separation, and personal growth, and through it all, they had remained committed to understanding, supporting, and valuing each other. This realization brought a profound sense of gratitude and contentment, reinforcing the belief that their bond was rare and enduring. In this stage of their story, love was a conscious choice, renewed each day through attention, empathy, and shared effort. It was no longer only about the excitement of connection, but about the deep fulfillment that comes from mutual respect, support, and understanding. They had learned that the most meaningful relationships are built not on fleeting emotions, but on sustained care and conscious nurturing. They also discovered that love could inspire hope and resilience. In facing challenges together, they drew strength from one another, finding courage and confidence that might not have existed individually. Their connection became a source of empowerment, reminding them that partnership is not just about affection, but also about shared growth, encouragement, and mutual support. As part 6 of their story unfolds, the lessons of patience, resilience, empathy, and conscious commitment are evident. They continue to navigate life together, embracing challenges and joys with a sense of partnership that is rare and profound. Their bond, tested and strengthened over time, demonstrates the enduring power of love that is thoughtful, patient, and human-centered. By the end of this chapter, they have built a relationship that is not only emotionally fulfilling, but also resilient, grounded, and inspiring. The journey they share serves as a testament to the power of genuine connection, showing that love, when nurtured with care and understanding, can endure life's unpredictability and create a bond that is unforgettable. This final part highlights not just the triumph of reunion, but the ongoing commitment to growth, empathy, and shared joy that defines their remarkable story.